why are you interviewing? Am I not good enough for the role that I've been doing for 6 months? And, he looked at me and said, I think that you could do a great job, but you're just not bitchy enough for the role. And there was another woman who would have also been on the management team. There were only two of us who were kind of functioning in this role. And he said, and honestly, I just don't think that the board would do well with two women in positions of power. And it was like my glass ceiling came crashing down, right? It was like, first of all, I'm not bitchy enough, and there's only enough room for one woman in leadership in this company.
This podcast is brought to you by Penji. Penji is a creative subscription service that gives you access to pre-vetted, agency-trained creatives from all over the world. From graphic design to illustrations to social media management and web development, it's all included for one monthly price. It's time to say goodbye to the hassle of searching for top-notch creative talent. With Penji, you get quality and consistency delivered right to your inbox every day, carefully crafted for you by humans. So meet your new creative team today. Head over to penji.co for more and enter the coupon code located within the podcast show notes.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the First 100 podcast. This is where we explore the journey of entrepreneurs, business owners, agency leaders, and so many more people as they share with us the strategies, the challenges, and the triumphs that have led them to secure those first 100 customers. I'm your host, Daniela, and I'm Penji's partnership coordinator. Today, I'm joined here with a very special guest, Cheryl Perez. Hi, Cheryl. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
It's very good to have you. Very excited to have you on the podcast today. For anybody who is just new to this, who is getting to know you, who doesn't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of a quick intro and a rundown of you?
Absolutely. I am so excited to be here with everyone today. I am Cheryl CP Perez. All of my peeps, my folks call me CP. So please call me CP if you so much desire. I actually am a 25-year entrepreneur that focuses on consulting work as an operations consultant for small businesses and nonprofits. And a few years ago, I actually added what my favorite component is to my business, which is coaching for startup and growth stage entrepreneurs. I focus on helping folks get their structures and their strategies, their systems and processes, and their squads developed and built out so that they can ultimately grow their dream businesses and get to that life of freedom that we all start our businesses for, to have the processes and the systems and everything in place to be able to grow big empires, but also relax and enjoy life. It's my first passion and love, and I'm also the host of my YouTube channel, CPTV, which right now I think that we're at 30,000 subscribers. And on a weekly basis, I provide free training around structure, strategy, systems, and squads to growth stage and startup entrepreneurs. And I'm excited to be here with you guys today.
Excited to have you. That's a pretty big resume you've got, and very interesting. I actually wanted to ask you some questions regarding your job, and this is one that this is just out of my curiosity. But what made you want to go into nonprofits and small businesses specifically?
You know, um, as an entrepreneur, when you are first starting, my very first entrepreneurial experience, I didn't even recognize was an entrepreneurial experience. I went to college, thought I was going to be a lawyer, finished school a little early, and decided to do an externship at the law school that I was accepted to. Worked with a student who had graduated in a big law firm in DC and absolutely hated it. And at that point, I said, I do not want to be in big attorney, corporate attorney, doing billable hours. And so it caused me to have to reflect on where I was going. And I decided, I think I'm going to try out graduate school in business. I've always enjoyed my business classes because it was marketing and communications was my major. And I always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial spark. I mean, I grew up really poor. My family, I was like a first gen student, and my family, my mom and dad didn't have a whole lot of money to support me. And so I did all kinds of like businesses on the side in order to make money. I did hair, I did nails. Um, I made dinners and sold them and didn't even realize that those were entrepreneurial types of endeavors because I'd never been exposed to entrepreneurship. As a child, I was always taught go to school, and plan to work for somebody else. And so when I went back to graduate school, it opened up my eyes to the reality of what was my drive and what my spirit and, was telling me. And I said, all right, I'm gonna work with international companies, and I want to be involved with international companies. And so I went overseas as a volunteer, and through my natural skill set of being able to help organizations kind of start from scratch, got a contract with a government agency to do that full time. And that was also kind of an entrepreneurial experience because I was independent and kind of freelancing, but had no idea that I was starting a business. So I didn't do any of the good stuff right. But that's where my passion for nonprofits and working with organizations and helping them kind of start from the ground up and grow, was really fueled, and I kind of fell into it without even knowing that I was falling into it.
That's incredible. I mean, it's very, I think, very interesting that you were kind of just, life just took you where it took you and didn't even recognize it at first. And then you sort of had to like realize, like, oh, actually, what I'm doing right now is entrepreneurship.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think that I'm a big believer in the universe, and that nothing really happens for, no reason at all. And I think that no matter how hard I fought it and thought that I was supposed to go in a direction, every single circumstance and situation that occurred in my life kept leading me back to entrepreneurship. It was really insane. Looking back over the years, I've been like, "Oh my god, you couldn't escape it." There was just no way because that was obviously what I was intended to do. It is so much my purpose. It is what fulfills me, entrepreneurship in general, and I love doing what I do, but I didn't even realize it then that the universe was gonna say, "Nope, you keep steering off the path. We're gonna put you back we're gonna put you back on it to where you're supposed to end up." Yeah.
That's incredible. Yeah, well, that's very good. I mean, congratulations. I think a lot of people have that dream of being able to have that established business and being able to sort of be their own bosses, with like working for the man can be really stressful for almost everyone.
It can be a toxic relationship, I agree.
And it's kind of like one that you can't let go of, right? Because it's like, I need money, but I also don't want a job. But I wanted to ask because I think, as like people who dream to have this at some time in the future, I think when you're sort of in that stage where you want to do it, or maybe you're starting out to do it, you're very worried about how that outcome is going to be. What were some pivotal moments that actually helped shape your career and, get you to a stable place where you could say, like, yeah, this can be like my full time thing? Um,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Um, it's so true because I think that my path is a lot of other people's path as well, and it's actually a path that I teach, in one of my mini courses on, kind of how to start a consulting, coaching, or service-based business, and the path really did start as a side hustle, and I think that for a lot of people, it starts as a side hustle because you have that fear of taking that leap, right? And so you continue to endure, as you've kind of alluded to, this toxic relationship sometimes just so that you can kind of get going and get started. So my business was initially, before I realized it was a business, it was my full-time thing because I was a freelancer, and then I even fought it even more, and after my contract ended, instead of pursuing more independent contracts, I was like, "Okay, well, that was great, now it's time for me to go work for somebody else," and so I did. I worked in corporate America, but always had what I was doing overseas, as an unknown business as a side hustle. And I thought originally that it was just gonna stay a side hustle. I'm like, "Oh, I can make extra money. I can build a thing. I'm supposed to work in corporate America." And there were so many moments in my corporate life that were pivotal in screaming at me, girl, this side hustle thing is just temporary. And I think that one of the first moments was, I was working in sales and marketing at a large corporation, and I was working my butt off because I thought I wanted to get this promotion to, run the team. And, the person who was in that position, I was just kind of waiting and biding my time for when they were gonna leave, that moment where you're like, "Oh my god, please retire." And I was waiting, and they finally did. And the organization actually gave me the interim title, no more money, for 6 months. And I thought, "It's okay. I'm gonna do my due diligence. I'm going to work my way up. This is this corporate ladder." And I ended up having kind of a health situation going on in my gallbladder. I had to have surgery. It was like an emergency surgery situation, and I was out on leave. And a friend of mine, I had such great friends there, called me, and she was in HR, and she was like, "They are interviewing for your position, the one that you're waiting for." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Why would they do that while I'm out, and why would they even be interviewing for it?" And so I actually shortened my leave, came back to work 2 weeks early, went into the CEO's office and said, "Hey, what is it that I am missing? Why are you interviewing? Am I not good enough for the role that I've been doing for 6 months?" And, he looked at me and said, "I think that you could do a great job, but you're just not bitchy enough for the role." And there was another woman who would have also been on the management team. There were only 2 of us who were kind of functioning in this role, and he said, "And honestly, I just don't think that the board would do well with 2 women in positions of power." And it was like my glass ceiling came crashing down, right? It was like, first of all, I'm not bitchy enough. So I'm too like not bitchy. And there's only enough room for one woman in leadership at this company. And that was a huge pivotal moment. I was devastated. I refused to let him see me cry, but that's what I wanted to do. And, I went home that night and said to myself, this I can't continue along these lines. And so I did leave that organization, go to a different one, and had almost an exact similar experience. I was selling, and they told me that, they couldn't give me more of a raise than that because it wouldn't be fiscally responsible. And so those 2 moments, I think happening back to back, although they were like 2 or 3 years apart, that was the end game. That was "You know what? I'm done." And I quit. The second job, I walked in and I said, "It's not fiscally responsible for me to be here anymore." And I quit on the spot. But I had been doing all of the steps behind the scenes to build my side hustle because after that first experience, I decided I need to make sure that I am ready for this side hustle to be my full-time thing. And so I began building the right type of business, the structures and all of my strategies, my game plan. I began building my client base, doing more jobs on the side, getting my marketing together, my website, like really building this thing so that when I walked in there that last time and quit forever, 25 years ago, it was scary, but I felt like I was ready. I had to do it because I just kept being smacked in the face in corporate America. So those were 2 moments that I think were deciding factors for me to really move and go.
That's insane. I mean, what a slap in the face, honestly, for them to be like, "You're too nice and you're a woman." Like,
Exactly.
I'm sorry, I can't control my gender. I would do mean this it's sexist to say, but also ridiculous. Like,
But it's reality sometimes for, especially for women in corporate America. It's like a thing, the only thing he didn't say that could have hurt even more is that, "Oh my god, and you probably wanna have kids," or like you're childbearing because the time I was, like, still building my family too, so that was the only thing that he didn't say that could have really crushed me, but everything else, he put it out there.
that's insane. I mean, and I'm glad that you kind of got out of it because, like you said, it can be something that's very soul crushing, and I think people struggle to sort of find themselves in that kind of feeling. So you essentially have helped a lot of businesses like yours grow like you grew yours, right?
Yes.
And I guess it's like a very sort of personal thing for you since you have also gone through that kind of struggle before. But I wonder, how are you actually like, what are the steps or what are the processes that you are doing to help these businesses scale, grow, get big enough? I think scaling is probably one of the scariest thing for business owners.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, in my coaching business, I have three primary products and services that I provide, and it starts with setting up and starting the right way. You can't get to the scaling part if your foundation is not laid properly. And so, a lot of my coachees will start with my startup business bundle, which is a series of online courses that they tap into that literally walks you through setting up the right structures and creating your initial strategies. So, getting your business, bank account, your address, your phone number, your LLC, your EIN, making sure that you have the niche done, the market research, that you know your competitors, that you've kind of created that foundation and that you've determined what your real true product and service is going to be and who your customer is going to be. Because that's really important before you can ultimately scale. And then once I have worked with my students and gotten through that piece, then you would move more into my group coaching programs that are focused around building your processes because that's really how you scale, right? You cannot move, you can't handle volume, you can't keep customers, you can't attract customers if you don't have what I call the five core business processes in place. And so in my group coaching programs, we work on those core processes: lead generation, sales, your onboarding and service, and then your offboarding processes. And we create those. And I automate those with my students because that also allows you to scale. You can handle a lot more volume if a lot of stuff is automated and you're not doing it. And once you have the processes created and automated and mapped out, now you can start hiring your squad and finding your team members and outsourcing things and bringing people in and partnering with vendors so that you can begin to delegate a lot of those things to others. And that's truly how you scale, right? But you can't do any of that unless you've got those first two pieces. And so, I really do work on the structure and strategies and then the systems and processes and squads. And that's really like my 4S to freedom framework. And that's what I've done in every single business that I've started. And that's what I work with every single coachee and student that I have on as well.
Very interesting. And what you said about foundations is really important. But I wanted to also ask, when it comes to actually begin that process of outsourcing and getting a team, what do you think people need to be prepared with? I think
Mm.
as we are like Penji, what we do is we are for people who outsource, right? So that's certainly, we'll get a lot of businesses who are outsourcing their graphic design. And we see a lot of people who struggle with outsourcing, right? That is a process that they need to understand, especially with things like UX, UI. We spoke about this, I think, on our last call.
Yeah.
How, a lot of people, they need to go in and they need to have something to ask for. They can't just say, build me a website. And I think this happens for a lot of different industries for like, it happens to us here at the graphic design, but I think it happens with people who want to outsource content marketing, who want to outsource the, sales funnels or whatever it is that they're looking for. What would you say that people need to sort of prepare in their minds when it comes to that part of outsourcing?
Yeah. That is such a great question. And it's a huge problem, I would say, that I see as well in my coaches and my students who want to get to that point where they want to build their teams. Because when you think about outsourcing, it's the same thing as insourcing, right? Insourcing means that you're hiring someone internally to be a part of your like W-2 employee base. But when you outsource, it's the exact same thing. The difference is they're just a 1099, and you're not paying taxes or providing them with benefits. There's literally no difference. So you're growing your team either way. And there are various positions in your organization that you're going to have to fill as you begin to grow. And you've got to figure out, is that an insourced position or is that an outsourced position? And the only way that you're going to know who to find and how to find them is, again, not to sound like a broken record, but you've got to have kind of your processes mapped out. So I always tell people when you have an SOP, right? When you create a standard operating procedure or a workflow of how something happens inside of your business, I don't care if it's content creation or marketing, like in the instance of Penji. Let's just say that um, I've got a content creation process, or I don't. It's in my head, and I'm just kind of doing it. And I determine as a business owner, oh my God, I have got to outsource this stuff because I can't keep spending time doing it. Well, in order to know how to do that, you have to first take a deep breath and actually write out everything that you do, all of the steps that you do. I call it like a skills and tasks dump. And you've got to kind of just write it all out. Oh my God, I'm just going to dump it, right? And the best way to do it is to figure out what you do in each of the things and the steps in your process. So for me, like my content generation process, the first thing that I do is look at data. That's the first thing. So I'm like, okay, I look at all the data, all the numbers, and the numbers will tell me what kind of content I should be making. And then the next step is for me to actually say, okay, here's the 5 content topics that I've determined from the data are doing the best or that are, going to be helpful or going to drive people to a certain product or going to drive people to like my content. And you kind of go through those steps and figure out what they are. And then inside of those steps, you write out everything that you do. And once you write that out, you can then figure out who or what should be doing those steps. And so the next thing is who's responsible? Is it a piece of technology that you already have in place that you can get? Or is it a person that you need to outsource or hire or insource for? And once you've mapped that out, you've kind of created a job description, or in the event of outsourcing, you've kind of created a work order, and then you just start finding the partners. You start looking for the partners and you say, these are all the things I need done. Can you do them? Do you do them? And how much do you charge for doing them? And do you have references of other people who have used you to do them? So you have to be very clear as the owner of your business and as the entrepreneur and telling folks, especially when you're outsourcing, exactly what you need them to do. And that's why oftentimes outsourcing relationships don't work. And I'm sure you guys have experienced it. Someone hires you and then you're waiting. You're like, okay, so what graphic design needs do you have? Who's the audience that I'm talking to? Is it photos? Do you want carousels? Do you want video? What do you want your website to look like? And people don't have any of that mapped out because they haven't sat down and said, this is what I'm already doing, and this is who I need to hire in order to do it. So those are really what I would say the steps to outsourcing. You first have to know what all of the things that you need outsourced, and then ultimately create that partner, that outsourced profile of who you're looking for to get that done, and make sure that you hire someone that can get all the tasks done and they understand what you're expecting in that scope of work.
Yeah, it's very important. I think because, like you said, we have had that experience, but I think in general, just having sometimes it's not about having the right person or the wrong person. Sometimes it's just you're not a good fit with a certain, business. Like two things maybe just don't, they're not that's not the missing puzzle piece.
Right.
It's where you have to sort of take a step back and realize like maybe the problem is not that they're not doing a good job, or maybe the problem is not me not being good enough. Maybe this is just not the right person for this project or for this thing or whatever it is that I'm doing. And I think a lot of people struggle with that realization. And
Yeah.
as you said, sort of it reminds me of when I had my first job. Like I had just gotten out of not out of high school, out of college. And, my boss was, like, trying to I mean, I was obviously very inexperienced, and my boss was trying to teach me, like, how to do my job, right? And I had, like, all of these tasks, and I was so overwhelmed, and I was like, "How do people, like, work? Like, this is so much." And he was like, "You need to, like, map yourself. Like, you need to, like, write it out." He's like and he gave me this thing, and he was like, "Write down what you do every day. Like, if literally the first thing that you do is come in here and make yourself a cup of coffee, write that down because then that's gonna, like, make so much more sense in your head, and then you know how to ask for help, and you know where you need like, where you're overwhelmed, what you don't know." And I was like, That's probably the best advice that I think I have gotten in
He
my."
sounds like a great coach.
Yeah,
He sounds like a great leader for sure.
he was, and I didn't, like I didn't realize how big that would be for me because then it helped me so much with organization, which I think is just something that people don't really understand when they are starting all of these kind of endeavors.
Oh my god, it's so true, and that's really what an SOP is and what mapping out a workflow is or what getting your processes documented is. It just helps you organize your brain, and you're absolutely right. I think that when relationships, especially outsourced relationships, fail, it typically is because both parties don't understand the expectations. And so when the expectations aren't clear, then you can't meet them. Like
Yeah.
it's impossible for someone to meet them. And oftentimes, especially as a business owner, if I'm outsourcing, it's my responsibility to have that clarity and give it to who I'm expecting. So um yeah, I agree.
Yeah, very important. I also wanted to ask you a couple more questions. I know that you've spoken a lot about promoting diversity and inclusion in your business. And I was just wondering, how does that play into your company culture? How does that actually come into play when you're actually working with your team and hiring and doing all of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that being a Black woman, diversity and equity and inclusion is at the core of my value system because I've experienced so many things, I'll say, or situations that are exclusive. And so I focus our culture and our efforts and energy on everyone's skill sets being critical to our growth and empowerment as a team. And for me, diverse skill sets and diverse life and experiences and culture and genders and orientations. I mean, everything about that lends to skill, right? Because your skill sets are a combination of things that you are good at naturally, but also things that you become good at because of your experiences. And I think for me, the more diverse our organization is, the more creative we are, the faster we grow, and I think the more success we have. It's sometimes it's difficult for me because I you tend to and just knowing from my HR background, you tend to hire who you are. And so, it's funny because, I have a lot of women, and I have a lot of women in color who women of color who work for me because I'm a woman of color and you tend to attract who you are. So I have to make a conscious decision to say, no, you know what? We need to add, more men. We need to add, more diverse experiences. We need to add, folks who have disabilities and who are looking at it from that perspective because honestly, the customer that we serve is so diverse that I need to have all of that input from my team in order for us to attract them, in order for us to nurture them, and ultimately in order for us to convert them into customers. And so it is in every single conversation that I have. It is intrinsic in our hiring practices. And it's also, critical in our messaging and the services that we put together. Like all of my online courses are usually available both in audio and video because yeah, there's people who don't watch video and don't have the ability to watch video, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's an important piece. I'm working right now on some of our workbooks being converted into Braille because I think that's important. It is very expensive. I've come to learn to do that. So it's a work in progress. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's I try to make sure that it is involved. It is throughout the entire organizational structure and what we deliver from a product and service perspective, but also who delivers those services, our customer service team, our marketing team, everyone.
Well, and it does, like you said, appeal to different perspectives. Not everyone has the same life and the same experiences. And especially in America where there's like so many different types of people and
Yeah,
different kinds of like backgrounds for everybody, right?
absolutely. It's so true.
Yeah. And I had one more question for you.
Absolutely.
I know that you've also helped a lot of nonprofits grow, right? Which is a whole different ballpark than small businesses. Obviously, it's still kind of growing a business because a nonprofit is still kind of the entity and you need to have teams like marketing and HR and stuff like that in it. But I'm still curious, What would you say are the structural differences in building those up? Is there like a difference that you do when you're coaching a person who's like building up a nonprofit versus someone who's starting like their baking business or I don't know, like their candle selling business or something?
Absolutely. There's huge differences. And I get this question a lot, especially from my startup entrepreneurs who come to me with their business ideas. And sometimes they feel like when their business ideas are tied to social causes, then that means that they need to start a nonprofit organization. And structurally, they are still corporations, right? And they are. But at the core of a nonprofit organization is the board of directors, who is really, the team that is charged with fiscal responsibility because they have a fiduciary responsibility, but also being the board of advisors for that founder and whoever that is. And so that in itself makes it fundamentally different than a small business because usually small business owners or entrepreneurs that are running for profit, they are their own thing, right? It's their brain, it's their stuff, and sometimes they struggle with not having an advisory board of folks to be able to help them. So I do recommend to my coachees when they get to a certain point to create one in order to get to that next level. But for nonprofits, I think structurally the biggest difference is setting up that board structure and those board processes. And so I work a lot with nonprofit organizations and nonprofit founders in building that basic structure of the board because everything else is really the same, like you mentioned of a small business. And, you know, you gotta have your departments, you've gotta have your marketing, you've gotta have HR, you've gotta have programming, which would ultimately be like products and services. You've gotta have fundraising, which is equivalent to like the sales team. So everything else structurally is pretty similar. The board is the biggest difference for nonprofits. And you've got to have a good recruiting structure in place for them. You've got to have a good meeting structure in place for them. And all of those structures and processes will create a strong board. And when you have a strong board of directors, it really is impossible for a nonprofit organization to not have some success and continue to grow. And it's really where I started. My very first business I didn't know was a business was all about helping nonprofit organizations overseas build from the ground up. And so it's like at my core of who I am and what I do, which is a part of the reason why I work with them as well as, the small business. But I do a lot more nonprofit consulting than I do coaching. Meaning, helping the founders kind of get their structure set up. Yes. Get their corporations registered. Yes. But I haven't really dove into that skill set and knowledge base that I have for nonprofits. I'm working probably 2025. I'll be doing a lot more online courses around board recruiting and board meeting structure. And I do have some one on one coaches who are nonprofit founders, and their experiences are very, very different than the for profit ones because they're with this board. You have a team of bosses and they founded the organization and built into their structure. They've got like this team of bosses telling them what to do. It frustrates the heck out of them.
I can imagine. And I mean, financially, I think it's so much different because a nonprofit is not necessarily sort of trying to get money in the same way that a business is. I guess, like, they rely more on like the goodness of people's
Yes.
lives and
Yes, they're selling mushy feelings. I always say, "You're selling mushy feelings." Everybody else
ha-
is selling something more concrete, and it's a harder sell, quite
it's a harder
frankly.
sell for
It's a
sure.
harder
I
sell.
feel like, a business can be a little bit more kind of like, I don't want to say greedy, but they don't have to hide the fact that they're trying to make money.
Right,
Right.
right. Yep, nonprofits, they can't be a lot of people think that nonprofits can't make profit, and they can, right? And they do. But they have to put their profits back into the organization versus a small business owner, they get to keep the profits, so
Yeah, it's different for sure. Um, Cheryl, it's been great having you today. You know a lot, and I mean, I can tell that you have experienced a lot. Um, Before I let you go, though, I do have some questions that are kind of just to get to know you a little bit better,
alright.
and I'm just gonna ask them really fast, and just tell me the first thing that comes to your mind.
Alright, I'm down, I'm down.
Okay, let me get started. Coffee or tea?
Both.
Both. Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
Favorite social media platform?
YouTube.
What's your go-to karaoke song?
Lauryn Hill and Fuji's Killing Me Softly.
Oh my gosh, okay. Books or podcasts?
Books.
One word that describes you?
Loyal.
Favorite no, dream vacation, sorry.
Oh, actually Greece.
Grocery.
Santorini and the islands. I'm planning Mykonos. I'm planning something for next year to go.
Superpower you'd wanna have?
Mm. Control things with my mind.
Control things with your mind, yeah, that's a big one. Um, and last question, biggest pet peeve?
Ah. Mm. Biggest pet peeve. That's a good one. Wow, that stumped me. My biggest pet peeve is probably lying.
People who lie?
Yeah, people who lie. It's kind of an insult to my intelligence, I feel like. Like, dude, I know you're lying. Come on, that doesn't even make any sense. So you're lying.
Especially when the lie is obvious, like, hell.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, well, awesome. It was great. I will let you go now. But before, if you want to tell our audience or anybody that is interested in working with you, who wants to find you, who wants to ask you questions, do consulting, floor is yours.
Yeah, I would say they could go right to my YouTube channel at Cheryl C. Perez. That is probably the best way on YouTube. It's got everything and details, and you can also like join my email list. Or they can always check out my website at CherylCPerez.com. I'm also on IG, which is a great place to DM me at Cheryl C. Perez. So all the social media platforms is a great place to reach me. And then also going to my website, I would say.
Amazing. Yeah, I will be adding those links to the description of this so that people can go ahead and click and go and find you. It
Perfect.
was great having you today.
It
Thank you
was
so much
great
for sharing
talking to
this.
you too. I enjoyed myself so much.
Me too. It was great. You were a great guest.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Nice to see you.
I'll see you next time.
Bye.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest, and to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend, and of course, subscribe.